This morning, the countdown is on, 24 hours away from early voting. Where can Republicans make the biggest gains? Will Democrats get the turnout they want? What the first few days of early voting will tell us about Election Day itself. The Texas Land Commissioner, that office does more than you think, and it's on your ballot when you go vote.
Why does a physician like yourself want to be Texas Land Commissioner?
Well, actually, the General Land Office runs veterans nursing homes, which runs right up my alley as a physician.
Dr. Dawn Buckingham, the Republican.
We both were in runoffs, and the polls at that time were showing me down double digits, and we won by 6 points. So we've got a path we just got to execute here in the final weeks.
Plus, Democrat Jay Cleberg from the legendary King Ranch family. Both candidates take our questions in just a moment. And Republicans continue to gain ground in South Texas. The GOP outraised Democrats there over the summer in the three biggest congressional races in the state.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning to you. Early voting begins tomorrow. The November midterm election finally upon us here. Lots to discuss this morning. First, though, the top political headlines across our state. Texas minorities are most likely to have their ballots rejected because of the state's new voting laws. The Brenner Center for Justice at New York University studied this. Remember, the new law that Republicans passed requires that absentee voters put their driver's license number or the last four digits of their social security number on the ballot. And that has to match what is also on the voter's registration form. This study found that Latino, Asian, and Black voters had their ballots rejected far more than white voters. Solar and wind energy saved Texans nearly $1 billion this year in electric costs. An energy analysis group called Idea Smiths did this survey. With a coal or natural gas plant, you have to continuously buy fuel to burn energy. That's what one expert told the Dallas Morning News. But wind and solar doesn't have that expense. Experts and many lawmakers tell us that Texas needs a variety of energy sources as the state continues to grow. And outside Corpus Christi last night, Donald Trump held a Get Out the Vote rally. What's interesting here is who was not at that rally. Governor Greg Abbott. Abbott's campaign said he was out of state raising money. He was in Florida specifically. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and Attorney General Ken Paxton did attend that. Let's begin, though, with a rare opening in a statewide office. The Texas Land Commissioner. That position does more than you think. It manages the Alamo, public land and beaches, and distributes disaster recovery money, among other things. The incumbent is Republican George P. Bush. He left the seat to run for Attorney General. This morning, we start with the Republican who wants to be a successor. Dr. Dawn Buckingham here, an eye surgeon from outside Austin. Dr. Buckingham, welcome to the program. Let me ask you a basic question out of the gate. Why does a physician like yourself want to be Texas Land Commissioner?
Well, actually, the General Land Office runs veterans nursing homes, which runs right up my alley as a physician. Additionally, as a physician, what I do every day, people come to me with their problems. We find a way to fix their problems, which is all of what the General Land Office is about. We fund education. We do disaster recovery. Like I said, we have several state veterans programs we run. We're the guardians and stewards of 13 million acres of state lands. And I also come from a rural background, so it's right into my skill set, and we are very excited about the opportunity to serve.
Well, let me ask you, a Republican is vacating this office, as we all know, George P. Bush. Are there any specific changes you want to make if elected on day one?
I think there are large parts of the agency that are doing really well. I feel like the disaster recovery, whatever's going on there, the folks down in the Houston area who are 5 years out of Hurricane Harvey don't feel like they've recovered enough. And whether that's General Land Office or local issues, we want to be sure that the people who need resources and need help get it. That's what we're going to work on.
Well, on your website, I want to ask you about that. You show a picture of Buffalo Bayou in downtown Houston as it's flooding, and your predecessor was criticized, your potential predecessor. I'm getting ahead of myself here, Dr. Buckingham. But George P. Bush was criticized for withholding disaster funds and giving them to rural counties farther inland than Harris County. How would you do it differently if presented with the same situation?
What we need to do is look at everything. We need to build a collaborative approach with our local officials because, the recovery in a disaster, of course, is everything from your smallest mayor to the federal government. And so we need to find a way to coordinate those resources. And again, my focus is that the people who need help get it.
And Dr. Buckingham, you also talk about investing in coastal infrastructure. And one of the things scientists say that would really do this is a coastal barrier program, kind of like, New Orleans has, that the Ike Dike is what it's called down in the Houston area. It will stop storm surge. It's shown that it's done that in the New Orleans area, but it's expensive, $31 billion. Do you support that?
I was a part of that legislation and a funding mechanism passing in the Senate. I'm glad to be a part of that. We know how incredibly important our coastline is, and especially the Houston Ship Channel and the port there. If we ever got a big storm right up the ship channel, we would be in a world of hurt. So we're excited about that. We'll look at the different funding mechanisms. I understand there's some federal dollars coming that way, and we look to partnering, with the engineers working on that project and getting it done.
Well, in June, as you know, Dr. Buckingham, Congress approved the plan, but there were 5 Texas Republicans who voted against it. Congressman Pat Fallon, Lance Gooden, Troy Nails from Fort Bend County, Chip Roy from Austin, and Ben Taylor from Collin County. Were those 5 in the wrong for voting against something that would protect Texas?
I haven't had a chance to talk to them about why they voted that way. So who knows why that was, but we're looking forward to being a positive influence on that project and hopefully getting it done and protecting our coastline.
And the big question is when, and I know Texas is relying on federal money to pay for this since it's so expensive, but realistically, every 6 months, Houston really kind of gets anxious because of what happens in the Gulf with hurricane season. How long might it take to get something like this up and going?
I wish I had a crystal ball that could give me that answer, because we've been talking about this coastal barrier project for a very long time. But again, like I said, our goal is to get in, be a positive influence, be collaborative in nature. It's how I've served in the Texas Senate, and get the project done.
Dr. Buckingham, your Democratic opponent, Jay Cleberg, says that you refuse to debate or meet him at any event where he is present. Is that the case? And why wouldn't you appear side by side and compare ideas against him?
That is simply not the case. We have not received any request to debate. We run a very busy schedule, but, so I don't know what he's referring to on that front.
And for voters who aren't as familiar with the duties of this office, which we just discussed, and the GLO also handles the Alamo as of about 11 years ago too, takes care of that. But how are you most different, would you tell Texas voters, from your opponent, Jay Cleberg?
There's a clear difference in the candidates in this race. My opponent is a Green New Deal activist. You start shutting down oil and gas on state lands like the federal government has done on federal lands, and you see devastation across our economy and hurting our families that are economically disadvantaged the most. And so several differences. One, we are going to be sure that we keep our energy independence. We want to be sure that we're helping our families who need the help the most. So there are a lot of differences. One is on education. We're a big funder, not just of K through 12 education, but also the Permanent University Fund. And so just being sure that our students have the resources and the funding to be sure we're doing the best we can for our kids and their education.
Dr. Buckingham, thank you very much for the time.
Thanks so much. You have a great day.
We'll speak with her opponent, Jay Cleberg, in a moment, though. First, the governor's race. One thing that has really insulated Governor Greg Abbott politically over the years is that he's a tremendous fundraiser. The Texas Tribune published a project the other day detailing how Abbott is really in a league of his own in that regard. Ian Mitra is the senior managing editor of the Texas Tribune. He joins us each week from Austin. Ian, good to see you. For viewers who have not yet seen this online project, what are the other major findings that your team made?
Well, this project, our team kind of looked back since 1995 at finance records, campaign finance records, and really just kind of looked back and as a whole just really showed how prodigious a fundraiser Greg Abbott is. He's raised nearly $350 million over that span of time. He's got nearly $40 million donors, people who have donated up to $1 million or over $1 million to his campaign. And this is something that the governor he really builds these relationships on. And obviously, when you have a war chest built up like that, it can really scare off opponents.
Right.
You can also have strong influence in the legislature too because of the power that you wield.
And speaking of opponents, Beto O'Rourke on the Democratic side is no slouch in this department.
No, he's, whether it was his 2018 Senate campaign or even now he's actually caught up in cash on hand in terms of the last finance period with the governor. Of course, the governor has quite a bit more in spending and has done a lot more in ads, which for a race like this in a state like this, you're going to need all the money you can get. So it's a really expensive race to run. So Beto O'Rourke is a good fundraiser, but Greg Abbott is a prodigious one.
Indeed so. Thanks a lot. I am back to you in just a moment. Coming up next here this morning, Jay Cleberg, the Democrat running for Texas Land Commissioner with the best resume any Democrat has had in years running for that seat. And Republicans outraised Democrats in South Texas. We'll talk about what that means for Election Day in just a moment. In fact, though, one of the top Latino political consultants in the country, who happens to be a Texas Democrat, has something to say about South Texas and his political party and what Democrats should be doing in that part of the state. Chuck Rocha tells it like no one else. He's on the latest episode of Y'all-ticks that we just dropped this morning. Welcome back to Inside Texas Politics. Now to the Democrat running for Texas Land Commissioner. It's Jay Cleberg. His family owns the famous King Ranch in South Texas, and his resume is one of the best that a Democrat has had in years while running for this seat.
Jay, thanks for the time. I want to start off with the basics here. You're from the King Ranch family, the famed King Ranch family. You're a conservationist. You have land management experience. But polls show that you're 8 points behind a physician from outside Austin. How in the world is that happening?
I think one of the things that we've learned throughout this campaign is we've got to educate people about the importance of these offices. And certainly this is one that's the oldest constitutional office in the state of Texas. It manages 13 million acres of public lands, provides critical funding to, and manages the largest K through 12 endowment in the country, veterans benefits and disaster recovery. I think when people understand, and we've put about 60,000 miles on my pickup truck to let people know how important this office is, and that you want someone there with a steady hand who has relevant experience. And so we think that we got a path to victory here. We both were in runoffs, and the polls at that time were showing me down double digits, and we won by 6 points. So we've got a path. We just got to execute here in the final weeks.
Well, let's talk about the final weeks and executing that. Last time a Democrat has been in this office, Jay, they were elected in 1998. How do you close that gap in the remaining 4.5 weeks?
Well, we've traveled all over the state. We were up in Amarillo about 10 days ago. We've been in Abilene and San Angelo. I'm in El Paso now. And so we're really focusing on areas where the General Land Office has a real impact. You've got a huge veterans community in West Texas. It's in part why I'm in El Paso now. There's a veterans home here, and really trying to tell people how it impacts their lives, and specific to veterans, making a contrast to my opponent who was on the board of and profited from an organization that scammed veterans for their GI Bill money. And so educating people about the differences between my 20 years of experience in natural resource management and land conservation work and my opponent, who's an ophthalmologist who's profited off the backs of veterans. So this is a final push to make sure that people, even in places like the Texas coast, where you've got 25% of the population and 25% of the economy, and this office is going to be investing about $30 billion in the next 20 years in making sure that we protect it. So it's important, and we're trying to reach as many people as we can.
The current office holder, the current Texas Land Commissioner, is George P. Bush. He's a Republican. He got caught up in quite a bit of, I would call it scandal, for not giving federal grant money, disaster recovery money, to Harris County, which suffered after Hurricane Harvey, instead giving it to rural counties a little farther inland. How would you address that differently? How would you distribute disaster recovery funds differently, Jay?
You look at where the General Land Office initially set up the highest risk counties, and they were essentially the 18 coastal counties, and then came back in and added an additional 29 to that list. If you look at where the percentage of damages were, 50% of the $125 billion of damage was in Harris County alone. And so I would make sure that the funds that were meant by Congress to go into Houston, not just for Harvey, but also for floods that had occurred prior to Harvey, that those funds get into the community where they're needed. And so we're going to put together a strike force that will, in the first 90 days of taking office, identify how to get those funds out quickly. It's not just those Harvey funds. You've got $8.4 billion in federal natural disaster relief funds that have not been spent in the state of Texas that go back to Hurricane Dolly. And so we're going to make sure that we get those funds down in the communities that need them, because essentially right now we're just waiting for the next storm to happen. We're not planning for it.
Jay, you said that your opponent refuses to debate. Just the other day on Twitter, you had quite a long thread on that. We asked Dr. Buckingham about that. She's told us that she's not received any requests to debate or to appear with you.
Yeah, we've had two organizations that we know of that have asked for a debate, and we have accepted. And obviously, as we all know, she has not. And then we also challenged her.
Who are those organizations, Jay? And do you know when they reached out roughly?
Yeah, there was an organization, EarthX, that's up in Dallas that has reached out twice. And then I believe that a group out of Galveston has asked the same thing. And it was going to be sometime in October. I know that EarthX has reached out over the last few months to offer up both of us to enter into a public forum. And I'll say it now that we'd love to have a debate, because the people of Texas deserve to know what this office does and what it can do under the right leadership. And we have been very forthright about what our plans are and our vision for this office. And my opponent is out shooting clays and playing golf with donors.
Jay, we appreciate the time.
Thank you.
You know, there are 3 congressional races in South Texas that might be spoilers come Election Day. We're talking solid blue districts that could run red. We'll discuss that next on the Roundtable.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Aya Mitra is back with us from Austin at the Texas Tribune. Bud Kennedy is here from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And Bernadine Steptoe is a political producer at WFAA and joins us each week for this segment. Aya, let's start with you. Early voting starts tomorrow. A poll from the Texas Politics Project at UT Austin had some bad news for Democrats the other day.
Yeah, it sure did. If you're looking at the top of the ballot with the Beto O'Rourke race challenging Governor Greg Abbott, Greg Abbott has an 11-point lead according to the latest UT poll. That margin was about 5 points in the last UT poll, so showing definitely trending the wrong way for O'Rourke. And even the Democrats on other statewide races were all kind of double digits down. So it's not a good look. We're just ahead of early voting for the Democrats.
And Bud, that's a respected poll. What would have caused such a widening of that gap?
Well, I think that people are getting back toward their basic partisan view. The Republicans are starting to say, okay, we're not crossing over. The independents in that poll really went for Abbott. The independents went about almost 3-1 for Greg Abbott. And Hispanic voters are split 50-50. Greg Abbott is picking up momentum.
And Bernadine, when it comes to independents and Latino voters, Beto O'Rourke can't afford to lose any of them. How significant is this?
Well, it's very significant, but I will say that you really don't start saying who's winning or losing until the voting starts. But it is going to depend upon who can get their supporters to the polls. And if you're looking at this latest poll, then the Democrats are in trouble. But as I say, it might be too soon to just totally write them off or to write off Beto until the voting actually starts, which is November the 8th.
It's always too soon, but we love to look towards the future on programs like this, especially Inside Texas Politics. I want to ask about Republicans continue to make inroads in South Texas. In fact, the Republican candidates for Congress down there in 3 different seats, they outraised the Democrats. That's just another, significant, chipping away at the big blue wall down there, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this, Republicans really saw an opening with, the 2020 election. Joe Biden didn't perform as well there in South Texas. And so they saw this opening. Obviously, the districts have been redrawn since the 2021 legislative session. So Republicans really see an opportunity to connect. Obviously, we'll see how the trends go, but the fundraising numbers certainly look good for Republicans in those races.
But for decades, Democrats have dominated there. Why aren't Democrats shoring up this part of the state?
Well, of course, this is a Republican cycle, and Republicans want to make inroads and flip some seats this cycle. Republicans have got everything going their way. They've got the main appeals in the South Texas are jobs, economic success, faith and values. Those are all strong appeals in the Valley. You have a governor at the top of the ticket, the first lady whose family has Monterey roots, fighting for law and order, public safety, which appeals to older voters in the Valley. The Republicans have a chance to flip one, maybe two of those three congressional seats. They're also outspending Democrats 2-1.
And Bernadine, Republicans are clearly making the investment. They continue to do that on this, multiple cycles here. Democrats seem to be just ceding this part of the state with the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee not even putting any money down here.
I know it because keep in mind too, Texas is definitely Republican. And in South Texas, you're seeing that trend going more Republican. But also the Republicans are putting up some good candidates. They're not putting up candidates who think that they cannot win or will not win. These are good candidates. They're local candidates. They're candidates who the voters like, know, and they're trending toward them. So it's not just the money, although money helps, but they're putting up some very good candidates, local candidates who are doing very well.
Yeah, and what that says about how the Democrats might respond to that. They haven't responded in a big way yet, but we'll see what happens on November the 8th and see if they lick their wounds down there or if they're doing a victory lap. I and Bud and Bernadine, thank you guys very much. We appreciate that. Thank you for watching as well. We're back again next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics. Have a great week.